Hey, it's Joshua from Geek Review Stuff. Today, I'm going over one of my favorite games of all time, and my personal favorite point-and-click adventure game, Critters for Sale. Critters for Sale is a relatively unknown game in comparison to its point-and-click contemporaries such as Myst and Grim Fandango. While point-and-click adventure games tend to be a bit odd, Critters for Sale takes that to the extreme with psychedelic, ditherpunk, 1-bit graphics reminiscent of science hypertalk titles, and extremist story elements that seem like they're pulled out of a Lovecraft novel. Critters for Sale's visual style is perhaps its most standout feature upon first glance. A striking 1-bit black and white style with surprisingly high definition pixel art. The digitized faces of characters shift and morph in an inorganic, seemingly interpolated fashion. The backgrounds and interactable items range from standard day-to-day fare like slot machines and paintings to more abstract and absurd things like non-Euclidean hallways and murderous statues. The monochromatic color scheme combined with the pixelated graphical style might make it seem difficult to find interactive objects if you haven't played the game, which is common in a lot of these point-and-click adventure games, but I found the things I could interact with stood out and were relatively easy to find, as most of them had an animated sheen. Clicking the entire screen to find anything to progress the game, which is, again, an issue that plagues adventure games of old, isn't an issue that I found very often in Critters for Sale. Another half of the presentation, the sound design, is also nearly impeccable, ranging from progressive rock bass lines to smooth jazz trumpets and even ambient and noise music. The sound effects are also good, if not better than the songs, all of them being unique. Some of them are foreboding while others are whimsical and fun, like the music. They really set a good mood for whatever's happening on screen, and the entire sound design is really great for getting enthralled in the world of Critters for Sale. Gameplay, as you'd expect from a point-and-click adventure game, is relatively simple. You can click around different areas to talk to people, interact with objects, and move around. Interaction with characters tends to not have many options and is just clicking through a dialogue box similar to that of a visual novel, where there are responses though they tend to just be yes or no responses or similarly simple ones. Each of the different stories or critters takes place in a unique time, place, and as a unique person. Each of these stories takes place out of order, and the story is mostly to be put together by the player, so no particular order is required when playing through the game, except one notable exception, the dragon. Each critter also has multiple different endings to find, some of which are quite obtuse and difficult, only being for true completionists. Most of the story, however, can be found through the few canon endings, which are quite quick to find, meaning the entire playthrough only took me a few hours. The puzzles, unlike some adventure games, aren't too cryptic, but most of them seem to be in a very good spot difficulty-wise. The hardest puzzles took me a bit of doing the same thing, backtracking and writing down notes, but eventually all of it was solvable. With good pace, this game could be played in an afternoon or even a weekend, but the gameplay loop didn't hook me enough to keep me playing for more than about 45 minutes at a time. This seems intentional though, with bite-sized micro-stories and relatively disconnected timelines. Keeping a word processor open or a notepad handy when playing this game, in my opinion, is a must, not just for the puzzles, but to keep its complicated and non-linear story straight. Especially with the way I play though, writing down notes, puzzles, and solutions is mandatory for coming back after a long break. This segment of the video will talk about the story of the game Critters for Sale. If you do not wish to be spoiled on this great story, please play the game yourself. It's quite short and only costs $10, so I would really recommend playing it before watching the story segment. Skip to the timestamp on screen if you wish to skip past the part of the video with spoilers. When Michael Jackson calls you on your phone, then 10 minutes later you witness him get shot by so-called Noidmen, you know a game's story is going to be weird, and Critters for Sale does all that. Each of the game's 5 stories has its own unique storytelling gimmick. The Snakes has Michael Jackson in a futuristic nightclub. The Goat has MC Ride in an Arabian desert 1,000 years ago. A demonic ritual in a Moroccan palace takes place in the Monkey. A doomsday casino with aliens in the Spider. And lastly, the Dragon has you become a god in the Reincarnation Palace. All of these stories are non-linear, but connect together in an overarching narrative in a way that really works effectively. For example, in The Goat, in the year 923, Stefan, better known as MC Ride, the lead singer from Death Grips, becomes the first of the Noidmen, a demonic group of Satan's servants, by taking a pill given him by Mustafa. Mustafa is also seen in The Monkey in 1997 as one who summons Satan and kicks off the events of the rest of the storyline. The main story isn't terribly complicated once you get the timeline figured out. However, I believe it was meant to be read into a bit, and once you do, the story really starts to shine. Covering things like ego death, cynicism, religion, predestination, and parallel worlds, it's clear it covers some pretty heavy topics. However, there are more lighthearted happenings, like an ending where you befriend the Prince of Mars over some Indian food, or another where you become MC Ride at a Death Grips concert. The way I see it, the story goes a little something like this. In 923, Mustafa and Stefan meet, and Stefan becomes the first Noidman. Then, in 1997, Mustafa helps summon Satan to help progress evil. Simultaneously, doomsday machines have been constructed and are set to activate during the same year. Coincidentally, Martians and Neptunians are attacking on the same exact day this is happening. The world, however, somehow continues in some shape and form until at least 2033, where Michael Jackson is killed by the Noidmen and the Limelight Club is destroyed. The Limelight Club being a hub between interdimensional and celestial beings. Eventually, an unknown amount of time passes and PSG Ultima, the group of people led by Mustafa, Stefan, and Geiger, who is another one of the Noidmen, I think, get a fourth member to lead the group, the so-called Tenant. The Tenant is known as Nosferatu and helps PSG Ultima and the Noidmen lead the universe with evil. I'm not sure if I've gotten all this correct, as the different timelines and stories seem to fold and combine in ways that either aren't explained in this game, or I'm simply not aware of. The ending of the game, after you unlock all the stories, reveals that more games will be made in the universe, and unlocks a new color palette and voice synthesizer, which breathed new life into the game and made it fun to go back through a couple endings and see how it looked in sound. If there are going to be more games in the series, I think that's pretty exciting and will hopefully bring new light to the somewhat convoluted story. Critters for Sale is a very unique game, to put it simply. While it's clear the gameplay took a bit of a backseat in order for the audio, video, and story to take precedence, it still remains one of, if not my favorite, point-and-click adventure games. A lack of pixel clicking and horrendously obtuse puzzles definitely make up for a lot of that, but so does the almost cosmic horror storytelling and absurdist humor. The game is more of an immersive experience than a game, but that's not a fault, rather something unique that lends the game its own je ne sais quoi. In conclusion, I'd have to give Critters for Sale a 6.4. It's a fantastic game with great presentation and unique story, but flawed execution and gameplay. I'm definitely intrigued to see where the series goes from here, and am waiting with my wallet open for the next game in the series to release. Thanks for watching. If you liked that video, please consider leaving a like, commenting, and subscribing. My current goal is at least 2 videos a month, and I'd like to be able to hit a video a week. If you want to see my live content, check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/geekssbm, or check out my Twitter at geekssbm.